Good morning, Ms. Hadebe.
Good morning, Chief Justice.
Are you well?
Yes,
Or is it under the circumstances?
under the circumstances, yes, Chief
Okay.
Justice.
All right. Tell us about where you obtained your BProc from.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I studied at the University of Zululand. I started in 1978. I couldn't go back in 1979. Then I went back again in 1980, 81, and I finished in 1982.
Why couldn't you go back if it's not confidential?
No, Chief Justice, it's not. It was the issue of funds. For me to be able to register initially in 1978, my aunt had to raise about 600 rands for that registration. But even then, it wasn't forthcoming in the sense that she also had to scrape around for it. But fortunately, at that time, there were people like Professor Bengu. Somehow he managed to keep us around at the university. I think it was 16 of us who did not have money for registration. For about a week, we just happened to be around there. Eventually, we managed to register. I did manage to get my first year courses, but then the year after that, it just became impossible. Then I went looking for employment in Ulundi. It so happened that when I went to, it was easy in those days. You would just walk into the office and get appointed. The person who signed my appointment documents was my now late brother and friend, BJ Buteles. I think somehow he saw some potential because he insisted that I should go back to school. I got introduced to Mr. I.C. Mir, and I didn't understand why they kept on insisting that I should apply because there was just nothing. But then I did apply, and the office of I.C. Mir sponsored my education. And for the first time, I could get 40 rands postal orders on a monthly basis, because when I first went to school, I stayed with my friend, Mrs. Mapumulo.
Yes.
She had a nursing mother. So we would go there. We didn't have a rent. There was a clinic running at the university, a very well-run clinic by Dr. Ben Gubane. She gave us the best medical attention for 1 rand. But we would sit there and we wouldn't have that rent. So whenever she was Miss Hlonga then, she would go home. Her mother was a divorced mother, but she was a nursing sister. So she would have 5 rands for me and 5 rands for Mrs. Mapumulo, so we would have that bit of money. But then when the office of Mr. Isimir got involved, then we got the luxury of getting 40 rands, which was quite a lot of money.
Yes.
And fortunately, we did well. So there were progressive organizations like the SASET. I remember the SASET, and there were some women organizations which gave us some bursaries. And up to the 3rd, 4th year, the situation had improved.
Yes. Did you meet the current DJP there or not?
I can't remember because the DJP, I would imagine, is younger than I am. The current DJP for KZN?
Yes.
Oh, yes, but I don't think we got formally introduced, but he must have been there during that time.
I was surprised when you said he's younger than you are.
No, I mistook the question for CJ. I'm sorry, Chief Justice.
Okay. Now, LLB, where did you do it?
At that stage, I had acquired my junior degree And the circumstances were such that I had to work. My background, I had to work. So I was working, I was in Ulundi then. We were a group of a few people who had done our junior degrees at the University of Zululand. So we would, after work, we would travel. And I remember I was the only female then who would travel with my colleagues from the offices. We would sometimes miss the tests in the evening because we would have to drive from work. But the lecturers were understanding and they would accommodate us, and we managed to finish our LLB.
Yes. You come across as relaxed now. Are you relaxed? Can we?
I'm feeling much better.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So going forward, where you are able to be brief, just be brief, and the details will be sought from you.
Yes, thank you, CJ.
Now, when were you given that opportunity to act in the High Court?
It was first around October in 2007 when the Chief Magistrate of Durban, Mr. Mabaso, recommended me to Judge Dlodlo in the Eastern Cape.
And you had been a magistrate for how many years as at that time?
From 1995 to 2007, it was about 12 years then.
Yes. And how did you find your acting instinct?
I was actually apprehensive when I went to the Eastern Cape because I was considering the language, but they were very...
Which language? East Coast?
Yes, Chief Justice. It felt, I thought it was going to be a foreign province, but they were very kind. And I was doing criminal court, so it was doable.
Yes. Did you ultimately get involved in civil matters?
It was somewhere in 2010, I had one acting stint in the Pietermaritzburg High Court.
Yes.
My first encounter with the civil court.
So, in all the divisions that you have acted in, if you add up your acting stints, how long would you say you have acted for?
On the overall?
Yes.
It was 1 month in 2010 and about 2 months. It was 2010, 2011. Then there was a lull after that. Then the invitations resurfaced in 2017. So, but to be specific on I've had more acting stints in the criminal court than in the civil court. In the civil court, I've had about four sessions.
Yes. Just in your own words, boast a bit and tell us why you believe you ought to be one of those to be recommended for appointment.
My view of the office of the judge is that it's an honorable profession. You influence the law by writing your judgments. But coming to me specifically, I believe that my story is a story of hope. And in my career and in my private life, I'm entrusted with the care of a number of young people. And when they listen to my story and they see what is possible under difficult circumstances, I think they get encouraged. So even becoming a magistrate, because I still go back to the same community that I grew amongst, I still see them on a monthly basis. I become their go-to person for a number of things. So I believe even being a magistrate for them, it was an achievement. So if they believe that despite the circumstances, you can still attain the office of a judge, I think I will encourage a lot of young people.
And if the interest is to know more about about your ability to grasp legal concepts and apply them properly, what would you have to say on that score? How did you ready yourself to function as a high court judge who find it reasonably easy to grasp legal concepts, however complex they may be said to be, and apply them as a judge is required to apply them? Whether you make mistakes in the process or not doesn't matter, we all make mistakes. But what is it that prepared you? How did you prepare yourself?
I think the work itself, Chief Justice, prepares you because you've got to do a lot of reading. You do a lot of research, and you write a judgment in which you want to be comfortable to give to a senior judge to criticize you and to correct you. So the job itself makes you to want to read. But the other day I was reading an article by Margaret Marshall. She's the Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Civil Judicial Court. She says for the courts, especially the Constitutional Court, to be able to address diversity, to address the diversity of the society we live in, she believes, from where she stands, that she says, because if we say people must be equipped in the sense that you must know or you must excel in the civil court, for instance, because I have the criminal background, then it means we won't be able to address the issues of diversity, because she says she believes that with judicial mentoring and judicial education, any judge, a judge in a higher court can serve in a lower court, and a judge in a lower court, a judge who specializes in civil court can specialize in the criminal court. It's a matter of the intellect. It's a matter of the courage that you want to do the work, and you just have to be teachable to be able to fit into whatever sphere you are called to serve in as a judge.
For what it is worth, did you know that retired Chief Justice Marshall was born and bred in South Africa?
Actually, she says that. She says
she says it.
I'm sorry, Chief Justice. She says she believes Bram Fisher would have objected, because Bram Fisher's theory was that she wants to keep the faith, to remain in South Africa, to keep the faith with the people who were disadvantaged by apartheid. So she says she left in 1968. She had not even studied law by then, but she went to Massachusetts and she became the Chief Justice.
Yes. Very well. Deputy Judge President.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Ms. Hadebe, how long have you been a regional magistrate?
DJP, if you could draw the mic closer to you so that, yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, DJP. I was appointed in 2004, so I've served as a regional court magistrate for about 12 years.
And you have had several acting stints in various divisions, as we have said, on the High Court bench. May you share with us your experiences on the High Court bench, if you can?
Initially, thank you, DJP. When I came to act in 2010, I was, so to say, comfortable to an extent because it was the criminal court. But then I had two hardworking assessors who challenged me, and I remember that we finalized our calendar before our time. Then it was Judge Msimango pushed that I had to do civil court. And my first experience, it was, I feared the motion court. But then I had a lot of help. I managed to do the motion court effectively, and now that I've had a second stint, a third stint, and I can say I still have the fear of the motion court, but I'm comfortable I can manage the court.
Yes. Did you experience any problems in the performance of your judicial duties?
Can I perhaps ask DJP problems in what sense?
Whether you encounter any problems in the performance of your duties, whatever problems can be attended to.
Well, thank you.
What you are doing.
There is a lot of work in the High Court, but when it comes to hurdles, you do get assisted. You can walk into any office and ask and be assisted.
But you did not have any particular problem.
My nemesis was the motion court, because coming from the background of the regional court, the most defense attorneys you may have, it's about 5. You walk into that court, there is no assessor. You are all by yourself. Then questions come from all over the house. You end up not even being able to grasp the names of the counsel. But the most important thing is, do you listen to them? Do you follow the argument? And then are you able to respond to what is being placed before you?
Yes, but did you manage to overcome such problems?
I overcame my nerves, yes, DJP.
Right. Do you have any outstanding judgments at the High Court?
Yes, I do. I have 2.
How old are they?
I picked them up in December. The situation was that when I left the regional court, I still had outstanding matters. I was appointed temporarily between July and September. Now, the situation in the regional court is that it is not as structured as the High Court. You find that on any given day, your prosecutor will carry about more than 10 dockets, and you have to deal with all of them. So for any sitting regional court magistrate, at any given time, you'll find that you are carrying about 30 partly head matters. So when I left the service, I knew I was going to leave at the end of March last year. But in the regional court, you do not have the option of saying, I am not going to start with new matters, because the witnesses will be there, the matters will be ready for hearing. Now, the Pinetown Court had 1 specialized court for sexual offences matters, and there were only 2 magistrates for the mainstream courts. So we served 10 police stations. And the Pinetown CBD has people importing themselves from the surrounding areas of Verelem, Kwamashu to come and commit the crime, and that it was only the 2 courts that had to deal with those matters. So when I left, I had that number of cases, but when I had the opportunity to be appointed to act for 3 months, I managed to deal with 24 judgments, and I finalized them. Then it was a matter of coming on a day or 2 in a week, then on a day or 2 in a week. Now, when I had done the matters that I had picked up in Durban in the civil court, I had to prioritize, because in the criminal court, people were in custody. So I opted to deal with the matters that were ready for judgment, which even in that case were not that easy, in the sense that there are problems. There's load shedding. In one matter which I finalized on Tuesday, the person is in CIMEX in Ebongweni in Kokstad. He demands to have a witness who's in CIMEX somewhere in Gauteng. So when you get that witness, when he eventually comes, you need to deal with that case and finalize it. So that's where that's how I found myself in the situation of having these 2 outstanding matters.
So you managed to finalize 24 out of how many cases?
There were 34 I finalized 24 between July and September. Then between January and now, I had a day or two in a week, a day or two in a week. In the regional court, I'm left with 4 partly heard matters.
And 2 in the High Court.
And 2 in the High Court, yes, DJP.
Yes, Ms. Hadebe, in the present constitutional dispensation, customary law enjoys equal status with common law, and it forms part of our law as well now. Do you have any knowledge of customary law?
The the basic that I have was when I dealt with Amakosi way back when I was head of office in Mzumbe. But even then, it was a matter of appeals emanating from the courts of Amakosi.
But during your acting stint, have you come across a scenario where you had to develop customary law?
Not really, DJP, no.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Deputy Judge President. MEC 2C.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Ms. Hadebe, I've got one question to ask. The issue of transformation of the judiciary is a challenge. It remains a reality that Black Africans, more especially women, are still underrepresented on the bench, and the situation has not improved in the post-1994 era, taking into consideration the demographics in KwaZulu-Natal. What is going to be your contribution in trying to remedy the imbalance, taking into consideration Section 174, 2 of our Constitution? And in your own words, you just heard your story is a story of hope. We hope you will contribute to change the situation.
Thank you, ma'am. My starting point will be that there should be willingness to address the situation from the people seized with that authority, because there are women. I happen to be one of them, but if you do not get the necessary exposure, then the impression may be that women are not there. But women are there. They need to be discovered, and they need to be trained and be given the opportunity to act. Because I was looking at the reports that were written, we were sent the comments that were made by the bodies. In our province, for instance, the demographics demand that the situation be addressed, and be addressed as of yesterday. So I would hope to see a situation where women are discovered and they get the necessary training.
Thank you.
Minister.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Minister.
Let me prefix my question with the following. There has been cases of magistrates who were elevated to the bench and who experienced difficulty. Do you believe that having served as a magistrate, especially at different levels, sufficiently prepares a person as a presiding officer to ascend to the bench, or is there something else that may be done to smooth out that passage upwards for the magistracy as a profession?
Thank you, Minister. I think the problem started, the problem of incapacity for people who are magistrates started when the regional court was structured to deal exclusively with criminal matters. But now that there is that mixture of the criminal court and the civil jurisdiction, I think in the long run, it's going to equip magistrates to be ready I studied civil law at university way back in the 90s. My first encounter was in the High Court when I was given the stint to act. But in the present setup where the civil jurisdiction is also offered in the regional court, I'm of the view that it will, to a certain extent, address that situation so that when people get that opportunity, they don't start from ground zero.
Well, actually, that leads to my next question, but before that, I'm a little bit unclear with the answer you've just given. I thought that district courts have both civil and criminal jurisdiction.
Yes.
How did it happen that in your case, as you say, you were only exposed to criminal until you got to regional?
Thank you, Minister. We came from the homeland when we qualified. We were still falling under the homeland. The nearest place you could go to, which I could go to, was Mzumbe Court, which is a small court in the rural South Coast, which did not have any civil jurisdiction. Then it so happened that I became head of office. When we were transferred together with my assistant to the Durban court. But when we came there, it was still a transitional stage, and the civil court was a preserve for certain people. You would be relegated to the traffic court. You just did not get to do the civil court. You did not have the choice to go and do the civil court.
Maybe the Chief Justice should intervene to make sure that the situation is evened out. But my last question relates to what I said follows on your earlier response, and that is, in your specific case, now that you have served in the regional court, and I can't recall when we introduced civil jurisdiction there, how much of civil have you since been exposed to, especially given the fact that, in your own admission, even as you acted in the High Court, again, you had little exposure to civil and seemed to have been, again, relegated to criminal work?
Thank you, Minister. I did not have any exposure because the Pinetown that I operated from the Pinetown court was not one of the designated courts. So I did not get any exposure at the regional court level.
But you're satisfied that with the current acting stint that you've had and the little exposure to civil work at the High Court, there has been sufficient preparation for you to deal effectively with the civil area? Or is it something that perhaps through judicial training may need to be firmed up?
Thank you, Minister. I believe that I've been given a variety of civil court roles, which through which I've managed to tap into different fields of the civil court jurisdiction so as to equip me to operate as a High Court judge.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Minister. Commissioner Norman.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good morning, Ms. Hadebe.
Good morning, ma'am.
Sorry. I just want, as a follow-up, the 3 outstanding judgments, if I may ask, are they relating to civil matters or criminal matters?
They
The 2, I beg your pardon, please.
Thank you, ma'am. The 2 are civil court matters.
Yes, and when do you think you'll have those delivered?
I've undertaken within me that at least by the end of this month, they must have been delivered.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Norman. Commissioner Mpofu.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Mpofu.
Yes, I just wanted to talk about the specialization that you seem to have in the criminal court. I see it as an advantage, by the way, because I think everyone brings whatever specialty. It might be tax law, it might be competition law. So at least if you bring some specialty, it's a good thing. you use the word teachable. Are you teachable? No, and more than that, willing to learn and acknowledge whatever shortcomings you might have on the civil side? And what extra steps have you taken to kind of catch up on that side?
Thank you, Mr. Mpofu. I believe that I'm teachable. I am open to criticism. In the judgments that I've written, I've freely given them to senior judges to look at them, those judgments that I would have written, and to criticize me. So I am teachable. I've found that the rules book, by I think by Judge Joffe and others, they actually carry a wealth of information in that it's not only the rule, they refer you. Then you can get into cases, you can read cases, and then in that sense you develop your knowledge of whatever concept that you would be dealing with with any given case.
Thank you, yeah. And by the way, I think what you call your rural background is also an advantage. But my next question is, it's just a matter of concern. You know, in the High Court, at least the ones where I practice here, it's, the whole question of partly heard matters has successfully been completely banned to, you know, so we don't have such a thing. I'm sure sometimes it's not avoidable. It's probably easier to achieve in a High Court, but the idea of having 34 part-heard matters surely must compromise the administration of justice. Are there any steps which are taken at the level of the regional courts and I'm sure it's not, you can't eliminate, but to discourage that kind of thing?
Thank you, Mr. Mpofu. The problem is, I think, like in any part of the country, the court rolls are not going down because of the level of crimes. I still believe that for a small court like Pinetown to have only 2 courts and service 10 police stations, it's not going to help to try and bring the rolls down. But I think looking at when I was a full-time magistrate, I carried those matters. But when I had the opportunity to deal specifically with my part heads, when I had that three-month appointment, there's a vast difference of the finalization rate.
Thank you, Sisha.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a follow-up there. The Judge President, Japie, and I visited one of the centers. I won't mention which town or city. I think it was it on a Thursday or a Friday? And there wasn't a single regional court magistrate. And we were led to believe that it's practice, particularly on Friday. You'll be lucky to find any one of them there. And if you do find them, it is because you have come before 9 a.m. Are you aware of that tendency?
Thank you, Chief Justice. I am definitely not aware, and it's a terrible indictment. But I've sat with one person, Mr. Kumede, for about 10 years. Somebody I would see almost every time, and we just did not have that luxury of being able to leave our courts because the workload was just too much.
There is a practice also, regional court practice, that I picked up in one of the provinces. Tell me if it applies either to the regional court in which you serve or some that you know within KZN. And it is this, by way of an example. A regional court magistrate in Pietermaritzburg would be traveling to Durban to do regional court there, regional court work there, and a regional court magistrate in Durban would be traveling to Pietermaritzburg, where this one comes from, to go and do work there. And it's where it is practiced, it encourages delays because apparently there is an S&T dimension that incentivizes these travels. You don't travel, you don't get S&T, you can't afford a more expensive vehicle or a more expensive house. Have you experienced that to be a problem in some of the courts? This thing of people, instead of staying where they are, doing basically the same work. It's not an issue of being exposed to more for reasons that do not make sense.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I'm trying to imagine a situation when a situation like that would obtain, because if you are appointed to act in the regional court, that's the only time perhaps I would expect people to travel, but for people to swap
Yes.
when you leave your own
As a
station,
matter of practice. You're not
it-
aware of that.
it's unacceptable, Chief Justice. I'm not aware of it.
So it hasn't contributed to your apartheid matters at all.
I've never had to travel at all. I've been permanently resident in Pinetown.
Thank you. Judge President Japi?
Thank you, Chief Justice. You've perhaps, Ms. Hadebe, dealt with some of the issues that I want to raise. When you resigned from the regional court, is that correct?
Yes, JP.
When you resigned, how many part-heard matters did you have?
I had about 34.
Yes. I must try and clear this up. There were times when I spoke to the regional president, regional court president, to ask him to release you to come and act, to come back to do part-heards. And he was often very reluctant to let you come because of the many part-heards you had in the regional court.
At one stage, Judge President, I was perhaps wrongly of the view that that was exactly the reason why I could not act in the period until I came back in 2017. That it helped somebody else to assist them for me not to come and act, because I don't believe that my situation is unique in carrying that number of partly heard matters.
You resigned and you say you had a number of partly heard matters, and then you were given an acting stint, and that was last year.
Yes, Judge President.
And now, how many partly heard matters do you still have in the regional court?
I've got 4.
You've got 4,
Yes,
and that's all.
that's all.
And in the High Court,
I have 2.
partly heard matters still,
Yes,
that needs to be finished.
yes.
And that was one of the difficulties that I personally experienced when you were acting. It does take some time for you to finish matters allocated to you. What would your comment be about that?
In the 4 acting stints in the civil court that I've had, I've never had delayed matters. It is only this time when I had to juggle the matters in Pinetown and the matters that I had outstanding in the High Court that my matters have been delayed.
You've already alluded that you did have some problems, and I know at one stage I had to make my registrar available to you to assist you in getting judgments out. Do you wish to make any comment about that?
I'm trying to understand the question, Judge President.
Well, I know there are difficulties with getting secretaries in the High Court. Did you experience that?
If the ideal situation, which does not normally happen, is that you would rather not pick partly heard matters if you are acting, because once you leave the High Court, it's difficult to get somebody to type your judgments.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, JP. Commissioner Singh?
Thank you very much, Chief Justice, and good morning, Ms. Hadebe.
Good morning, sir.
I see we live in neighboring suburbs in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yes.
I'm not far away from you. Chief Justice, I've been covered largely by Judge Japi and Commissioner Mpofu on the question of the outstanding judgments, which is a matter of concern. But what I'd like to know, Ms. Hadebe, is a question of, you resigned, I've heard that you resigned
Yes.
from the regional court. What were the circumstances that made you resign from the regional court? And just by the by, I see that maybe Commissioner Mpofu doesn't remember you, but 22 years ago, you introduced him and thanked him as a guest speaker at a function.
Yes.
It's on the record, yeah.
I plead guilty.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. It's, this reason is simple. I wasn't going anywhere. I had done the criminal court like forever, starting from the district court when I was in Durban and then moved to Pinetown. I didn't think there was any chance in hell of me going into the civil court. So I had to think in what other ways I could utilize the years that I had left of active service.
So you were frustrated at that time, and that gave a... Is this your first application to be a judge?
It is, Mr. Singh, I wouldn't like to use frustrated because the job that I did has afforded me a house. It has afforded me the education of my grandchildren. It has afforded me the opportunity to afford for my extended family and all the people that cross my path. So it wasn't as bad as frustrating, but I had reached the ceiling.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner Singh. Ms. Hadebe, you're excused. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice.